Julian just took a boatload of shots at Mal in his first episode, and it's kind of surprising that he did so subliminally, but if you read what he said out loud, you can see that it was pointed and towards Mal. So one of the highlights of what he said on his podcast was, I done things that put money in the pockets of others, hoping that one day that beautiful karma would find its way back to you. Now, beautiful karma is a reference to Mal. Mal is the one that would say my karma is beautiful. So that is not a reach. You can very much easily tell Julian is talking about Mal. Also, Julian says you've orchestrated in the shadows, making sure that facade doesn't seep into the public. You've worked twice as hard to make up for others' lack of work ethic. Now, Mal is known to not work so hard for the pod, and he's someone that even Rory has said on a previous episode that Mal arrives late to the show, which demonstrates a lack of work ethic. It's also something Joe said about Mal when he was on the Joe Budden podcast. And then Julian says, you placate the middleman for those two divided to speak to each other. I don't know who the middleman might be. Could it be him? Who knows? You go to work, smile, continue to make up for everyone's shortcomings, abandoning your own, but you must be a team player. But a team implies no individual is greater than the whole. I think he's talking about Mal here because that's also something Joe said about Mal and Rory. You know, these guys position themselves as team players, but they don't act like team players. You know, they seek preferential treatment and so on and so forth. Also, Julian says, you find solace in some of the supporting cast. One of them quits. Damn, then another one. There's a pattern here. Now, I don't know who he's talking about. Could he be talking about Yomi? Yomi was a figure of the pod. I believe she was a producer. So she appears not to be on the show anymore. There's some that say she's on the show, but all I know is that they don't talk about her, and I don't see her in any images. And then Julian says, you have to make the change that's long overdue. The bond you developed started in disappointment and grew to be genuine. Further on, he says, I was deeply committed to my role, both off camera and in front of the lens, and I had reached a point this year where no response was a response. Without getting into the weeds any more than I want to disclose, my next project is what I'm most excited about. Julian says also that he was fired. The signs were there, subtle and razor sharp along the way. He's grateful for his 3 years. Now, I didn't play the clip from his podcast because I felt like me talking about it would be more pointed. But just to highlight, what Julian did here is he put a lot of what he wanted to do on the back burner for Rory and Mal. Like, he, I guess, marginalized his voice. And also, he was trying to act like a team player, but felt like someone on the show wasn't doing the same and was acting like they were above everyone. Now, it's presumably Mal, but maybe it could be Rory, though I doubt it, because Rory did say that him and Julian are cool, but Mal unfollowed Julian. Also, Julian is kind of saying he feels he did a lot of the behind the camera stuff and in front of it to make the pod money, and he wasn't, given that money back or shown proper equity in whatever they did. I guess maybe he helped get ads or helped develop segments for the show. And he said 2 people resigned. Like I said, that might have been Yomi earlier. Well, I mean, this is interesting. I would argue, why didn't Julian just talk about it more directly? I think he wants to make sure his podcast is more of a success, but instead, he went the circuitous route of not really bringing things up and going towards, I guess the high road, but also taking the low road. My thing is, you might as well take the whole low road sometimes, because now you have a platform in which you can monetize directly off of it, but instead you took the middle ground and it wasn't as entertaining as it could have been. Your audience was tuning in for you for a moment. And that's one thing I think Joe used to do well, is whenever his audience was looking for him to speak on a subject, he delivered. he didn't do anything different, you know, than deliver. He didn't try to do subliminals. He went straight to it. And now that Julian finds himself as the lead of his own podcast, he's going to have to seize the moment. He's going to have to navigate away from what Rory and Mal do, which is to take half measures. Right now, it's a time for full measures. You either do it or you don't, and you step off. But let me know what you think in the comments. I listened to the podcast on audio for Julian, and then I watched it in video, and I must say, it was a bit easier to watch it in video because you get to see the imagery. In audio, his voice didn't play as well. I think when you're used to listening to Julian with co-hosts, it's odd. It's quite jarring to listen to him just solo for a long period of time, and that's what that podcast was. As to if Rory and Mal will respond, I guess not. I think they're trying to put this behind them and act like Julian wasn't a part of the show. But Julian did expose some things. Julian did kind of get at their foundation of their show. Like, oh, what's really going on at the Rory and Mal media company? Who's really putting in the work? Is there a culture of transparency? Or are people just showing up, taking advantage of each other? Rory and Mal are the ones that are taking all the credit while the people on the editing table, the producer table, labor away and deal with personalities that maybe aren't the most pleasant to work with. Like, I'm starting to think Mal isn't the easiest guy to collaborate with. While he may seem like a nice dude, I would think as far as productivity, he hampers it. All I gotta do is look back at that time when he refused to do an interview on another platform because he didn't want to ask someone if he could be on their show. I would be frustrated with that. And it lends to what Julian said in that subliminal diss of Mal. Alright, y'all. Follow me on Instagram to Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter to Stop TV. Subscribe to my Patreon. I just did a Twitter space with Julian where he talked about his show and whatnot. And it was an enlightening discussion about how to launch your own pod. So I think anybody who's a creator or is looking to be a creator might want to tap in to just kind of see the journey it takes to develop your own platform. All right, y'all. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.